I'm going to call the meeting to order. Will the secretary please read the roll?
Kathy Cavalier here. Tiffany DeMayo here. Bonnie Suckert
Here.
Frank
Frank
Rocco here.
Falcone.
Chris
Chris
Wilson,
Wilson
present
here. Rosario Scalia. Not present
at the moment,
at the moment.
right? Okay, can we rise for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texted him. It's like that.
Okay. Here he is. Hi, Rogerio.
Can't wait till we get out and touring it, mate.
That's all right. The only thing you missed was the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah. Okay. We need to consider approving the agenda for tonight. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Would just for the record, I know we've just said hi to Rosario, but just for the record at 5:02 that he arrived, just so that it's on the record, just that we've done that.
Yes, Tiffany will get him in. Okay, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as it's written.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, welcome to our visitors. Now is the time for public comment only on the agenda itself, nothing else. If you have no comment on our agenda, we will move on.
Open that door.
Hang on a second.
Correction.
I'm sorry, what's your question?
So.
No, you'll speak later in the meeting. Okay. Next, and Tiffany, I'm not forgetting it this time. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the minutes of our last meeting?
No.
May I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting as they were.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
That passed unanimously. We now move on to the question of the historic resources inventory. We have two applications. The first one is a Class 2 historic resource application for the Alice Grimm School located at 2 Bishop Hollow Road. And I would like to ask Kathy Cavalier to present on this.
Okay, the Alice Grimm Elementary School was presented for Class 2 resource. To be in the resource inventory, we suggested that in order to get it put into our ordinance, this is the first step. It has to meet one of multiple criteria. It was built in, I'll give you a little background, built in 1925. It was a Newtown elementary school. First principal was Alice Grimm. She served as the principal until 51. And at that time, the school was renamed Alice Grimm Elementary School in her honor. Her family goes back quite a ways. She had the Grimm homestead on Gradyville Road. And it's one of the oldest buildings in Newtown from 1735. She attended Chestnut Grove Seminary School. The reason I talk about her is that is basically what the school was named for her, and that is why she was an icon in the town. and her family very notable for their involvement in education. Her sister Myrtle also taught at the school. Her father served as school director in the 1900s in Newtown Township. Alice Grimm's educational career spanned 44 years. She received her degree in education from the U of P and Westchester State College at the time. She'd been known in town as a legend in her own time in town and was active in her community until her death. Built of stone, the original schoolhouse had no running water, and school children brought buckets from a nearby property to provide that. Having only 4 first floor rooms, the second floor was added in 1928. Cafeteria, 4 more rooms were added in 1950. 53 classrooms were added and administrative offices as the township was growing. It closed its doors in 1982 due to dwindling enrollment. Superintendent at that time was Stephen Frederick, who served as the last principal for Alice Grimm. He held a gala commemorating the school's closure and said, "It is a kind of Camelot that will live on like the legend of the people at the round table." Alice Grimm was very well loved by the neighbors, by everyone, the people who attend that, and to this day still. Students had very fond memories of the many community events that were held there throughout the years, the wonderful teachers, of course, Principal Alice Grimm and teacher John McCauley, who have both won multiple awards as, I think he was Teacher of the Year and a finalist in the National Teacher of the Year. The Paper Mill House, currently the Paper Mill House Museum, headquarters of the Newtown Square Historical Society, is currently creating an exhibit on Newtown's educational history, significant educators and students, of which the school is one of several. Just looking for my criteria here.
What else we have in here?
No, I have it in here. Basically, the school had to meet one of the numerous criteria for class 2 resource to be put in the resource inventory. I can go through each one. Properties that
These are the ones you have marked off.
thank you. I'm not going to go through every one. Properties of significant character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the township, county, region, commonwealth, or nation, in our case, of course, the township, or is associated with the life of a person significant in the past, of which it is Alice Grimm. And that is one. Number 2, property is associated with an event of importance in the history of the township, county, region, commonwealth. It was basically one of the first. We had several elementaries, but this is one of the largest. It was started in 1925. Prior to that, we had several older elementary schools, of which I mentioned Alice Grimm attended one of those. Yeah, I can put that. Property is part or related to a commercial center, park, community, or other distinctive area which should be preserved according to a historic, cultural, or architectural motif. Where the school is located is the center of Newtown Square now. Center originally started where the Square Tavern is. The center then migrated up to the corner of 252 and Westchester Pike. And that was the store center, the school, and it is a distinctive feature in that area. Property owes its unique location or singular physical characteristic representing an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, community, or township, which Alice Grimm Elementary does, and Stafford Friends does as well. It continues to be a familiar visual feature of our town. And 10, it exemplifies a cultural, political, economic, social, or historical heritage of the community. And it does in terms of our education and the growth of Newtown Township and the growth of our education and school district. And that is why we asked for it to be placed. And basically, if I'm assuming everybody's familiar with the ordinance and what it does and does not do. So that you know, this is, we did vote originally to place that and send it to the township supervisors for approval to go into the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
Mhm.
I guess we have representatives from the school here. If you would like to speak, would you go to the podium, identify yourself?
Excellent. Thank you so much. My name is Jill Doherty. I am Stratford Friend School Head of School, formerly the Alice B. Grimm. I appreciate your time and thank you so much for having me. It was really helpful to come last month to your meeting. And I certainly am excited and admire the work the Historical Society is doing. We sat down after the meeting here and looked at different things, and myself and our property committee did have some concerns, and I wanted to share those with you this evening. Stratford Friends is small. We have about 78 students year to year. We are K through 9th grade. We are a school for students with disabilities, specifically learning disabilities. So in our halls, the students that we celebrate every day have difficulty with learning that's connected with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ASD, ADD, ADHD, so much ADHD. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place to learn. Just like Alice B. back in the day, we have wonderful teachers who make it work every day. We are small but mighty, and the cost to run our school can be big. We first moved into the building in 2008, I believe, is when we opened our door there. The school had been it was founded 47 years ago. When we first came into the building, there was lots and lots and lots of deferred maintenance. In the last 8 years since I came to the school, we have been working really hard to make sure that that building with beautiful bones, that is everything and beautiful to see on the outside, needs lots of plumbing and electrical and windows and doors. And there's a lot of time and energy and certainly funding that goes into that. Some of the concerns that rose to myself as a school leader, we're really thinking about the health, welfare, and safety of our students first and foremost. Many of our students, along with learning disabilities, have physical disabilities as well. Oftentimes, we cannot always accommodate all of the students we would like to bring to our school because we are not ADA. We are not able to meet all of those needs. Making those accommodations and those changes are things that we're doing slowly but surely. And some of these ordinances put some of that work at risk or make it very, very costly to do so. We're also concerned about the safety of our building and being able to add things. We are currently thinking about how can we on the outside add a locked entryway so that a visitor to the building could come in and they could be checked first and make sure that they're a safe person to let into the building before they go forward. This is a horrible thing that we have to think about every day, but it is a thing that we have to think about every day. And that would change the face of the building. It would change the way the building looks from the outside. When I came last month, it was really helpful to understand your process, getting on the agenda, if there were changes to make, proposing those changes, getting to the meeting, and then waiting for approval before it can go to the Board of Commissioners. What we work for and rely on as a small independent school is federal funds and grants. Oftentimes we have 6 months to make sure once we receive those funds to have those funds spent. And if 60 to 90 days are waiting to see if we can have approval, it puts us out of being able to take those and make those changes. So making changes like having locked secure doors, walking into our building to keep our kids safe with the state safety grants that we're going to be working on would make it very difficult to get all the way to that. We're a Quaker school. We understand understand how important history is. We love Newtown Square, and in our 15 years here, we loved becoming a part of the community. We're a part of the business association, where we take part in some of the planting and the different things that the Newtown in Bloom do. We really enjoy being here. And our intent is to stay here in this beautiful building with beautiful old bones and questionable plumbing and other difficulties. Our building was 1925. The youngest building on the registry that you guys spoke about last year was 10 years older than our building. I understand the importance of Alice as a woman school leader who found it difficult to find her way in public schools because of the not quite as qualified fellows who got the job because gym is important ahead of me. And that's all right. I found my niche and I understand it. And to understand what Alice did all of those years ago to rise to a leadership position, I understand why celebrating Alice is important. I do not find that this is the way to see Alice's vision to make sure that children are well served in our community, served. I also want to mention that and the final one where you talked about being a part of the Newtown Township School, we are fully an independent school and are not at all associated with the township in that way. I just wanted to make a point of clarity. And I think that those are the things that are most important, making sure that we can move flexibly and quickly. During COVID, we found out that we needed lots and lots of fresh air. Who knew? Being able to go through and the project that we had to do to bring more fresh air and change the exchanges in the building were things that we had to be able to do in a few short months. Unlike most schools, we opened September 8th after the big shutdown, where most schools stayed closed for at least another 3 months. Our students with learning disabilities cannot afford to stay home those 3 extra months. They can't afford the kind of disruption that going through additional process can take. We love the building. We love it the way it looks, but we do love the flexibility that we need to be able to serve our children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Matt Heckendorn. I am the clerk of the property committee at Stratford Friends School. I think Jill covered the majority of the items, so I'll just echo some of those sentiments. And first of all, thank you. I greatly appreciate what you all are doing. I get that you're volunteers. I was on the Haverford Township Planning Commission for years, and we created a historical commission while I served, and I appreciate your role in the township. I think the main challenge for the Board of Trustees of Stratford Friends is the knowledge of the additional requirements and restrictions that a historic listing would necessarily place on the property. I'm the principal of Heckendorn Stiles Architects. We've had the opportunity of working on historical projects in Lower Merion, in Tredyffrin, in the city of Philadelphia. And I appreciate given an architectural need for a historical listing. But I acknowledge, and I've experienced in many instances, the additional time, which Joe alluded to, and additional costs that can bring to a property. It seems to me that this is primarily an effort to honor Alice Grimm, which is obviously an admirable pursuit. I think that given the particular needs of Stratford Friends School, this isn't quite the right way, given the potential impacts on an institution that's been part of this community for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. As I believe you know, if you're familiar with our ordinance, this commission concerns itself with the exterior of the building only, not with any interior changes. And what may or may not happen with your building is not set in stone. You might need to come back before us again, depending on what you want to do. But I know from my own experience as a prior museum director of historic structures that it is both challenging and possible to make an old, inconvenient building ADA accessible from the outside. And in terms of fundraising, sometimes having the historic designation can actually help. with certain kinds of grant applications. And with that, I'd like to ask if anybody on the commission has anything they want to say or any questions for you?
Is your biggest concern the time delay that you believe this ordinance would cause?
But I would just ask you to come back to the mic only because if somebody's listening at home, that's the only way they do.
Sure, time and funding, I think are our primary concerns, absolutely.
Okay.
Pardon?
Time would be the time delay, because I'm just reading through the ordinance here to see where the time delay.
So
Um,
if they want to make a change, they have to notify township that we need 30 days before the 30-day delay.
depends on what type of change, because the internal changes here to upkeep is
No,
not
there
included.
is, if you go further in.
I think what I'm hearing is the concern if there's an outside change
Mhm.
Yeah,
that they need to make, and I don't want to speak for the applicant or for the school, but what I'm hearing you say, if there's an outside change you need to make. If you've gotten grant funding to do the change, you've got a very short window to spend those dollars.
Absolutely. And being able to get materials in on time has been so challenging. It's always challenging since COVID. It's unbelievably challenging. So getting materials in for projects. So if projects change as they go through this process, ordering materials ahead of time won't work. And the changes that we're talking about are safety and security changes.
right.
So last month when you were at our meeting, we happened to have, was it last month that we had the Lysander
Yes.
Yeah.
farmhouse? Both examples, exactly what you mentioned here, was making that building ADA compliant and the entryway, making sure it was a locked entryway that only residents could enter. I mean, it's the exact same thing.
While I appreciate that,
Well, no, I'm not done.
okay,
The point that I wanted to make was, both of those things, what they presented and which I would naturally assume would be what your choice would be, was to make it fit at least with the exterior as much as possible, right? So that wasn't, are you concerned that we might say like, no, you need to go back and make other additional changes, or is it just to have to talk to us about that change altogether?
so I think the reality is that you could very well say, no, thank you, this doesn't look like it is fitting with the historical period. And the kind of security doors that we would be likely looking at
Mhm.
to have a locked entryway. All of our doors are locked, they're fobbed, teachers can get in. I'm not concerned about that, I'm concerned about an armed intruder busting into our
Sure.
building. And that's not going to look historical,
Mhm.
it's not.
Is it on the, would it be, I've never actually been into your building or accessed it in any way. Are all of the entryways accessed from Bishop Hollow Road? And nothing would be seen from
Our front
Newtown
office,
Street?
is right on Bishop Hollow Road.
Mhm.
All of the other one is seen from.
Westchester Pike?
Yes, either Westchester Pike or 252.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. We're certainly willing to work with you going forward in any way we can. Safety for those kids is extremely important, and we understand that. At this point, we need to move on to a vote for this. Does someone want to make a motion about this property?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Alice Green School as it was presented by them. Abby.
Okay, make a motion to approve it and forward it to the Board of Supervisors. They make the final decision. We do not. We make a recommendation. Anybody want to second that motion? Ruggiero, second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion is passed. Thank you very much. You will be notified when the Board of Supervisors is going to take it up. We don't control that. But I understand your time frame, and hopefully it will be quick.
So, yeah, so here's what I'll tell you. Actually, I was just in a meeting before I came to this one, discussing the Board of Supervisors procedures for this. So what I believe we're going to do is the Board of Supervisors would take it up at some point in the future. You would be notified of when that's going to be. And then they would make a decision if they wanted to make a map amendment change based on the information that the Historic Commission should send to them. And the Historic Commission should send a packet that basically says, this is the reasons why we think it should be. Here's what the applicant, or here's, in your case, you're not the applicant, but here's what the property owner, with the reasons why in your case, why you do not think it should be. And they would send that, the board would then review that application. If the board were to approve the application and say, yes, we think it ought to be considered for a map amendment, it would then go to the Planning Commission for review, because it's actually a map amendment change. The Planning Commission, you would have an opportunity to share similar to what you shared tonight. They would then make a recommendation back to the board one way or the other. Then it goes to an actual hearing before the board, which is a public hearing. You would again be notified, as would the neighbors around you be notified. I believe it's 200 feet. And then there would be the public hearing. Again, you would have an opportunity to share. And then that's when the map amendment would be voted on. So if a change were to happen to this and you were to become a class 2, I would see it, even best case scenario, if the board said, yeah, if the board said they wanted to make a decision at the July meeting, you're probably sometime in September or October before it's even before them again in that way. So, because there's also some windows, I have to figure out, there's like a 30-day window, and the way the Planning Commission meets could be 30 days before the board. I'm saying it could probably even be October, because just the way it would fall, if that makes sense. Any other questions that I can help answer? You can reach out to the township. I'm with the township, and I'll be glad to walk through. Steve, we're both Steves. Steve Bradley, who sits behind me, is the representative who's the administrative person for this board, and I'm the township manager. We can walk through that and go through it. The board hasn't taken up any of these yet. I don't know how quickly they're going to act. So, yeah. It's not a sequence established. And so that's actually what we were discussing today, trying to set the exact sequence, because that's what the board asked us to do. We're going to actually probably present that in July, and then let them have the packets that have been submitted so far, and then we'll go from there.
Are there a number of properties that have already been?
I believe there's just one or
No,
two.
there's 3.
Three. Okay, there's 3. Okay. And because it's a hearing, I doubt that they would do all 3 at the same time. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
well, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay if you want, but if you want to go home and get dinner, I understand. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a Class 2 historic resource application for the James Price House located at 571 North Newtown Street Road. We have been asked to delay the hearing on this. And so to accommodate that, I'd like a motion to table this until some future date. Would somebody make that motion?
I would make that motion that we table this until next meeting
Whenever.
or the following or whenever.
Yeah, second,
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion to table is granted. new business, the next item is subcommittee update regarding potential budget needs for 2024. Chris, this is you, and I don't expect you to have a great deal, but maybe you can enlighten us on what you do have.
I don't have a great deal. I do need to follow up with some committee members to see if I can make it a committee instead of just me. And I've started kind of hashing out the questions that exist. So
Okay,
if we could revisit this next month, that would be great.
certainly. Steve, I remember hearing in the committee of committees meeting
Yes,
that there are going to be budget workshops sometime this spring or summer.
yeah, they were we did June 6th or 9th, there was public workshops.
Oh, those are public ones.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, the committee, each committee, commission, board can submit their budget. We're not going to do a workshop to go for that purpose.
I didn't know if you were doing a teaching workshop for the commissions or not. Sounds like not.
But I mean, I can if we think there's benefit to doing that. Most of it, I mean, it's more of looking at and saying, based on where we are, this is what we need.
Right.
Or if you need assistance in that, please know that I myself or Yvonne, who is our finance person, we're more than happy to meet with any committee or talk with anybody from a committee related to what it is that you need help with. But I wasn't going to do, I mean, what we did in that meeting was the amount of training I had intended to do in regards to, here's how you fill out the sheet and here's, you know, that, but there was more of it's as a committee, what do you need?
Right.
You know, to do what you're doing and then what that looks like.
No, I guess when I took my notes on that meeting, I'm a terrible note taker.
Okay,
And when I took my notes on that, I left out the key word public.
yeah, okay, yeah, so we did have an educational public meeting.
Yes,
In-
that was the key word.
Yeah. So, and we did those in the early part of June.
I didn't have it.
Yeah. You had it
I,
right.
no, I didn't have it either.
It was Frank was at the meeting with me, so. Chris, I don't know if you have this or not, but it's a budget request form.
Awesome.
And the trick is that for every a separate request form has to be filled out for every single budget item.
Okay.
So I'm very glad that,
One form for application cost, one form for printing cost, one form for
bingo, you got it.
miscellaneous. I can do that.
Do you?
And, you know, if something like, for example, let's say there's an application cost that involves some printing, you can put all that as one. If you're doing something specific, separate, like you want to do a brochure and print, that's a separate.
That would be a project that you,
I will gather an outline of what we think our costs are
And
gonna
just-
be, and then we'll figure out how many of these we need to do.
Yeah, I'll be glad to work through you with
How are
you,
you?
how we want that.
Going to know, you know, the application fee. How are you
We're gonna figure out how many, then how much, and
how do we get
then
that information on?
we're,
What is this cost?
Phone calls.
I think we're still figuring that out,
Okay, that's what I was wondering, how we go about
because
the itemized list of that.
each one we
costs.
do, we should be able to learn a little more from.
okay, so you'll be
I will report back with much more information next month.
wonderful. And just so everybody's aware, once Chris and his subcommittee to be get done doing what they're doing, it comes back to us. And we have to review it and the commission as a whole has to pass on it. So this is a process that will take several go rounds. Okay. Discussion and possible action regarding the allocation of responsibility among commission members for submitting class 2 applications. AKA Kathy doesn't think she should have to do all the work.
That doesn't seem unreasonable.
Yes, and I think since we approved the historic sites survey and all the properties in there last meeting, and Rosario, I think you sent out also everybody has a
Yes,
copy.
Terry sent out the
So
book.
maybe we could discuss dividing up some of the properties. We can look at the most at risk. I've been driving and looking through the town to see what properties are owned privately, which ones aren't. That would be able to be the first on the list. But everybody can look at that and go through it. And I was just gonna come up with some method that we divide that up.
Yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion with regard to that. I've been thinking a lot about it since you and I were in touch about it. One of the challenges we have is the number of properties we can get through in the space of a year, which is fairly limited, especially since the Board of Supervisors don't seem to be in any particular hurry to work on what we send them. We initially, in our goals for this year, specified that we would try to do 8 properties.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if it might make sense to put together another small subcommittee of 2 or 3 people, thereby avoiding the sunshine laws. Who can get together and figure out and put in rank order what our top 10 to 15 projects are. And then when we know what the top 10 to 15 projects are, we can assign those out to different people. Would that seem to make sense?
Yeah, if we could determine which are the most at risk and which are the easiest,
Yeah, well, that would be, I think, for that.
that would
little
be, that would be a good place to
subcommittee,
start.
Yeah, to do. Who wants to volunteer for that subcommittee? It can be up to 3 people.
I wouldn't mind being on that.
I'll be on that subcommittee.
Okay, Kathy, you probably should be on it too, don't you think?
Sure, I can have
Okay, so that's the 3 of you.
the 4.
We're gonna say you might as well make it everybody.
It'll only
Well,
be 3.
3.
We need to limit it
Well,
to 3.
Chris is heading the budget one, Chris.
And he
You
needs
3.
people.
I'm available.
Okay, we need to say.
Okay, it will be Kathy, Tiffany, and Frank, who will consult with the other members of the
Yes.
commission.
Just remember, the final decision would be made here in this room anyway.
Yes, that's what I
So,
said.
yeah,
The final,
The final decision will be made here in this group.
it's
as a
like, so
whole.
let's say you guys come back with a plan and you say, these are the top 15 that we think it is. It would come back here to this group
And we'll approve
and
it.
you'll approve those
And then
top
we'll
15
assign
is my
people to
point.
it,
It's-
yeah.
yeah, okay.
could we just back up to, I just wanted to ask, with the procedure, when I heard you talking to the principal at Stratford Friends.
Yep.
You mentioned a part to the planning commission that I was not aware of after the supervisors.
Yeah.
Vote, to approve what we send them. It
Yeah.
goes again to the planning.
No,
commission?
so so let's say the supervisors say that, yep, we think that this is, so remember, this is a map amendment. So this is why I got a little confused early on. And if you remember, I said I thought there was another step, and that's why I was missing some piece. And so I got it clarified today finally, so that I now understand. Because it's a map amendment, any map amendment according to the MPC has to go before the planning commission for review before the board can actually hold the public hearing on it. So you're going to be recommending to the board to do a map amendment.
Mhm.
Board would then decide, yes, we're willing to have a map amendment related to this. It gets sent to the PC. When the PC does it, then that's what starts the 30-day window once they review it before the board can take action on it. So
But the board has already approved it, you're
the
saying.
board is
The
only
map amendment?
approved that they're going to consider going forward with a map amendment
On this property, on a
on that
specific property.
property. The public hearing would not be until after the planning commission has had a chance to review it and agrees that, or makes a recommendation or makes conditions that they think about that piece.
Yeah, it's basically just another version of what we do. We don't make the final decision, we make a recommendation.
Correct.
Then it's going to go to the planning commission, who will make a recommendation. They don't make a final decision.
Yes.
And it was their recommendation when we were doing the ordinance that these properties not be kept, put into the ordinance. Just making that clear so everybody knows that.
What?
It was the planning commission's recommendation that we not place the properties into our ordinance as
Ah.
other districts do and other townships do. So I just like to say for the record that that was their opinion at that time.
I guess that the planning commission is advisory to the board before the board make final decisions.
Just like this.
They
is a-
inform whether can be the pitfalls of deciding on that in terms of zoning and stuff like that. They review that at different levels.
They review it, they
Yeah.
look at it, they'll say, yes, we recommend that this be added, or no, we recommend that this not be added.
And do they have to have a hearing like we do?
Well,
Or
it's
there's the 30
a
day?
very similar type of approach to what you just did tonight. It's not a true hearing, but it's a re-evaluation, and then they have an action memo that they send to
But
the.
do they have to have the 30-day notice to the property owners before they can?
They would, I don't believe they need a 30-day notice. It's a 30 days once the planning commission has reviewed it, before the board can take action.
Okay,
Is my understanding.
Okay.
It'll be clear, it'll be clearly laid out, presented to the board. We're working on that. That's what we were working on before I came to this.
So the
meeting.
planning commission gets to recommend what's already been recommended by us and then goes to the board of supervisors and then
They're
they have to
recommending-
recommend that again. What are they looking at to make their recommendation, whether something goes into the ordinance or it doesn't? Based on
It's
everything we-
whether or not it gets added to the amendment to the township zoning map. That's the key. And so the MPC, the municipal planning code for Pennsylvania, says that the township board cannot act on amending the map without it going before the planning commission. It has to go before the planning commission.
and can the planning commission say that they don't?
Yeah, they can absolutely, just like, so let's say that an applicant came in.
Mhm.
And let's say I came in with my house and said, my house ought to be on the historic commission because I live there and I'm an important person, right? You
Right.
know, I mean, we know that's
Sure.
not true, but let's say that's what the case was. And so, and you all looked at that and you just the look like some of you gave me like, are you kidding me? And so, and you say, no, I don't think that is. But the board looked at it and said, well, maybe we ought to at least have the hearing on this. We're going to send this to the planning commission.
Mhm.
The planning commission looks at it and says, are you kidding me? There's no way that house should be on there. We say, no, we don't think it should be. It goes back to the board, right? All that is a recommendation, just like your recommendation. Your recommendation was that it shouldn't be.
Right,
The planning commission's recommendation was that it shouldn't be. The board has a hearing. And the board listens to both sides. They listen to me pontificate as to why I think my house has some great historic value.
right.
And, it was built in 1986, and so therefore it has great value. And we look at it and they, for whatever reason, the board would just say, yes, we agree with the planning commission and the historic commission. No, Stephen, you've lost your mind. Or after you presented everything, we actually do think that this ought to be done. And they can vote, even though the planning commission has said no, and even though you've said no, they could vote to approve it. So my point is that either, I
So they
mean,
can
they're
appeal our-
probably not going to. I
So
mean, that we
anyone
know.
can appeal our vote that we decided these are historic, when they came before us, or say we put the application in.
Well, no, they don't appeal, Kathy.
No, I'm saying, but how are they going to, if we said no here, it doesn't meet the criteria
Then it goes to the supervisors and if they-
anyway.
we send it up to the supervisors. And we send it up saying, we don't think this should be done.
But
The
we have an
super-
application that has to be.
The
acted on.
supervisors can say, we agree with you, it shouldn't be done, and then
It dies,
it dies.
Mhm.
right?
But if they say, well, we're not so sure. We want the planning commission to look at it, then they can send it to the planning commission. And the planning commission can say yes or no. And if they say yes, then it goes to a full hearing before the Board of Supervisors to get the final decision made. If the planning commission also says no, again, it dies.
But it's more likely so that's the far-fetched scenario. So the more likely scenarios
So
are,
the more likely is you say yes,
yes.
the board of
And we put the
supervisors.
application in.
The board of supervisors says, we're sending this to the planning commission. The planning commission reviews it and they have an action memo that goes to the board and says, we don't recommend that this zoning map amendment be done. Doesn't matter that they don't recommend it in other than the fact that when the board goes for the hearing, they now have, you have said we recommend it. The planning commission has said, no, we don't recommend it. The board of supervisors goes to have the hearing, they have the hearing, and they come back and they say, we've listened to all the sides. The property owner is not for it, but we've looked at it and what the packet that was put together for us by the Historic Commission is convincing to us that this is a class 2, it should be added. Yes. The packet that was put is not convincing to us. We hear what they said, but we don't know that it really meets this in full. So we therefore say no. I mean, it's basically comes back to that light. If the applicant is against it, right? You know, we support the applicant's position of no. If the applicant is asking for it, you say yes, the planning commission says yes. I mean, I'm assuming the board is going to say yes, right? I mean, that's the applicant wants it, you say yes, the planning commission still says no. The board's going to listen to what is there, but you've got two sides saying we really do want this. I can't say the board would say no or say yes, but I think they're going to have, I mean,
They're going to listen to.
they're
both
going to
sides.
listen to both sides and they're going to make a decision. It's going to be a public hearing. The neighbors come out and say, we don't want this because of X, Y, and Z. The neighbors come out and say, oh, we think that it's very important that this be treated as a historic property. You know, it could be any one of those things. And until we get to the hearing, I don't know what the board's decision would be. But the planning commission's role is not much different than your role, other than to say, we support it or we don't support it.
What I would suggest is it would be very, very helpful if we could have a flow chart on this.
Yeah.
And present at the next meeting so that everybody on the commission understands what the decision-making flow is.
Let's say this, if I have it approved by the board, I will have it to you at the next meeting. If not, it will be the meeting after. Because that's what I'm working on.
I guess one thing that Dr. Kathy was asking, we look from a particular viewpoint about this, right? We look at the historic features, the characteristics and stuff like that. The planning commission, what does it look at? That's what is not clear to me. So on what basis, what are the criteria for recommendation, or is just the zoning changes? That's what is the important to them?
Well, they're looking at, I mean, they're supposed to be looking at it as a holistic approach to the whole town and how we have zoning, what our zoning says, what our planning says, what our comprehensive plan says, and how does it fit? And if it fits in those things, then they should be saying yes, or they should be saying, we would say yes if these three things were met. We think that we have these three recommendations that go with it.
Historic preservation was one part of the plan, right? Moving forward to the township
Yes,
to preserve historic structures. So,
Yeah.
so they will consider that also.
they need to, they should be
need to
considering it,
consider
and if
it
they're
also.
not, my understanding, and I was not there for all these meetings, but my understanding was the reason why the planning commission was concerned was that the conditions that were for potential reuses of these buildings were not set in play at the time in which the ordinance, that they were concerned that there was some concern about what those conditions would be. So if you have a potential adaptive reuse, what would that be? And a perfect example is the James Price House. I mean, there is actually a real potential adaptive reuse that I don't even think anybody could have imagined on the day in which we were starting to set conditions, right? And so would you have listed a vet as possible one of the things for an historic property? I don't know that that would have come up as one of the 5 things you would have said. My guess is you would have thought about a bed and breakfast or there's lots of things that you can think about that would come up for historic properties. But they just weren't ready to just say blanket over a whole area. This is what we would want to see. And so I think that as one of the steps that should be a part of this group's process long-term is saying, these are some adaptive reuses that we think ought to be looked at as potentially being added to the ordinance. For example, we would say any structures along 252 could have potentially a commercial adaptive reuse. I'm not saying that would be for sure, but I'm just throwing that out as an option.
The ordinance already says that one of our duties as a commission is to help property owners come up with ideas for adaptive reuse.
Yes.
I mean, that's already in the ordinance.
Correct.
I just went through the ordinance. at some
Can I say
length.
one thing? I mean, and this is a reader, I'm not an expert on these things by any means. I did read the several chapters of the Code of the Township at the different zoning, because mine is in a residential, high residential zoning, right? And do you already have a limitation of what can be done? Because the zoning permits only some part. I read about religious institutions or stuff like that, depending on sites and so on. So you do already have some level of protection and restriction based on the zoning, even for a structure which might be readapted in terms of use.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think what I'm saying is that maybe as part of the incentives for people to decide to be a class 2/class 1, is that if you looked at it as a committee and said, if a property is, and I'm making this up, please understand, this is Steve flying off the top of his head.
Stephen, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this was not on our agenda and we've
Yeah.
gotten pretty far afield. Perhaps what we should do is take it up next month as an agenda item.
That's fine.
And perhaps at that point, we could have a flow chart, which I think would clarify things a lot. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk with you about that separately.
Okay.
Between now and then, flow charts are something I have a fair amount of experience with.
Yeah, we're working on that. What I'm saying is that the big thing I just wanted to make sure is that the board approves the flow. And that's
Understood.
what hopefully
Understood.
we'll have that on the agenda on the
Understood.
July 10th,
I
and then
think
I prepare.
initially a flow chart should represent what we are doing now.
Yeah.
And then it can always be changed.
Yeah.
To reflect what we should be doing. But let's put that on the agenda for next month, rather than take more time now, since it is not an agenda item. And we do have one more agenda item that we need to deal with, which is update and possible action regarding amendments to the Historic Preservation Ordinance. Now, we do have the one amendment that we proposed, 3 or 4 months ago at this point, which has still not been acted on. And the thought occurred to me that since it hasn't been acted on, this is a good time to give them another amendment that they can put with it that they then cannot act on, which is to change the 30-day requirement, which is causing us all kinds of scheduling problems, to a 28-day requirement. In other words, 4 weeks, which gets out of a lot of those scheduling problems. The sections of the ordinance that are involved in that, and you all, of course, have your ordinances with you, are section 93-5, historic resources inventory, subsections F.1 and F.2, which are on page 8 of your ordinance. And the other is section 69-6, subsections 2.F, 2.G, which are on page 11 of your ordinance. And I think if we can just ask the supervisors to make that change from 30 days to 28 days, we will, that will go a long way to solving the problems we've had of having to skip months because they don't have the right number of days in them. I'm open for discussion.
I agree.
We talked about it, so I agree with it.
Yeah.
We all agree that that's fine.
Okay, well, I would like to make a formal motion. I guess the chair can make a motion.
Yeah, and you have it written,
Pardon?
you have it written down what the amendment would be. You
Well,
just
yes,
written,
I gave Tiffany the section numbers.
Okay,
And so the motion would be that the 30-day requirement be changed to a 28-day requirement in the sections I specified.
Mhm.
Somebody want a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Stephen, is there any hope of the attorney getting to these at any time soon? Certainly in my lifetime.
So, the first one has been looked at briefly. I think he believes that there's some challenges to it. And he's actually looking at some language that potentially does what you wanted to do, but would be a little different. I think there was some concern with the language, and so he's working through what the language would
Well,
have to
we're
be
not
changed.
lawyers. If he wants to put it in legalese. that's
Well, I
fine.
think it was, so if I recall right, it was an issue of who made the decision and how the decision was made. I think that the way it was interpreted is not the way you meant it. And so I suggested that we look at it more in the direction that I thought you meant it. And so he's taking a look at that. But we can send this over along with that and see about making both of those changes.
Okay, that would be great. The public is all left, so we don't have any public comments. Items for the next agenda. One would be decision-making flow chart.
properties. We should
Report on the property
50 or
sub,
come up with a certain amount of property.
right, the
Divide
property
up for
subcommittee should
applications.
report. And the finance and planning subcommittee should report. Do we want to try and bring any properties in next week, or should we just deal with these matters next time?
Matters,
That's fine with me.
unless you have something ready to go.
There's always one ready to go. There's a mecca here. Yeah, let me see about one. We can try,
Okay.
so just to have one that wouldn't be,
Sure, okay. Well, then we'll have one new
Contentious.
property on the agenda next month as well.
one that wants to be on there.
Property to be determined. But there will be one. Okay, anything else? I have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we
I'll second that.
Ruggiero seconds. All in favor?